Hi, I'm Adam. Happy 1 year anniversary to Godot Game Lab. In this video, I'll show you all the game dev projects I've done in the last 6 years or so, including all the finished and abandoned ones as well. So I wanted to make games ever since I was a kid. I fell in love with video games at a very young age, and I was always motivated to study computer science to eventually make my own games. But you know how it is, life got in the way. I landed a job in web development and making games was never a priority anymore to me. So what changed? I decided to go back to university to study to become a teacher, and in 2018 an opportunity presented itself for my thesis. And that's why we start with the university stuff, because these projects you'll see here essentially sort of guided me back towards game development. So this is the first one. It's called Sprago Adventures. And what you need to know is that teaching spreadsheets is a really high priority in the Hungarian computer science curriculum. So together with my professor and my partner, we made this little 3D visualization tool, which helps explain algorithms a bit better in spreadsheet environments. So we have basically two little scenes here. Oh, and by the way, this was made in Unity. I know it's a sacrilege, but eventually we'll switch over to Godot, I promise. So we have two different scenes here explaining two different algorithms. So let's see the first one. It's called the forest. And we have two different modes for each of these visualizations. The demo plays on its own and the interactive has questions involved. I just show you the demo this time. So you see we have a really simplistic 3D scene here with some Matryoshka dolls, and we have some control. We can change the animation speed. We can provide some extra light if it's not bright enough in projectors in classrooms. And we can also adjust the power of emission the fire has. Then we need to pick a color which we want to count. So let's count this light blue one, I guess. And you'll see an animation starts playing on its own, where each of the dolls will receive a red or a green mark based on the Boolean expression we have, right? The doll color is equal to white and blue. And after we've done this, all the green ones, which are the ones we want to count, will just go closer to the fire. And essentially we have to count all the dolls which are closer next to the fire pit. And we can see that we have 4 dolls that match these criteria. So this is the first algorithm, and if we go back, we have the other one, which is an algorithm for linear search. It's a very basic computer science thing. And here we have a postman, this doll here, who wants to deliver a letter, but he has to search for the house because he only knows the recipient of the letter, right? So let's say we want to deliver a letter to the red doll, so we have to search for her house. And then the same thing kind of happens. First of all, we ask all the dolls if they are the red one or not. And essentially we find her, hopefully. Yeah, so when we found the red doll, we can sort of assign numbers to these houses and say we found her at the 7th position. Then we have a nice little firework effect, and we arrive at the conclusion that we had to deliver this letter to this magenta house, right? So this is a pretty basic application. I wouldn't call it a game, but I learned a ton about game development, or how to use Unity, how to write C# scripts, how to read documentation related to game development, animations, and a lot of other stuff, you know, UI. So that's the first project I've ever completed in a game engine. Fast forward to 2019, and one of my ex-classmates who studied psychology hit me up and said that for a research project he would need this slot machine game to do an experiment. So I was happy to help him, you know, and just hone my skills with Unity again, right? So this is very simple, you know, we have a lot of Hungarian text here which you can ignore, and then you have this little spinning wheel to decide how much token you are starting with. It seems random, but the whole thing about this project is that people participating in the experiment think they are playing a game, but all of these values and results are predetermined. So the main challenge of this game was to actually make it look like a real slot machine, while this friend of mine was able to program all the results and spins in the slot machine, right? So we have a text file available in this Unity folder where all the results for the game are predetermined. So this was the main point of the whole game, because that's how they can conduct the experiment and draw the conclusions, right? So it seems random, but it's actually not. So I can spin the wheel a couple of times, and I know for sure that the first hit I'll have is actually a row with 3 lemons. If we spin it a couple of times. And there it is. This will be the first where we win some, right? So this was a fun project to make, because I had to come up with algorithms which make it seem like this slot machine is rotating around randomly, but eventually stops at a given icon or a given fruit. So I had a lot of fun actually making this, because the challenge of it I really liked. So that is project 2 done in 2019. Now we jump into 2021, COVID times, and that is the most ambitious university project I've ever done, and also the last Unity project. This is more like a fully fledged serious game. Again, it's related to spreadsheets. It's basically a card game where you can use cards to brew potions to solve spreadsheet problems. I know it sounds weird. The whole setting is that you are a witch living alone inside the forest, and some ghosts are starting to haunt you. So you have to use your witchcraft and brew potions to scare them away. So if we click on play, you can see that we have 3 different sets of levels, which are all connected to different kinds of learning material or topics inside spreadsheets. So the first one is called string stones, and these levels or exercises are connected to string management, right? Then we have math meadows, which are math related, and so on. So if we select string stones, it's very much like the classic Candy Crush like mobile games where you have to unlock the levels one after another, and you have this 3-star scoring system. And if you take a look at the first level, this is how the game looks like. I know the graphics are a bit silly, so this is the time I realized I really suck at art. We tried to make it look good as much as we could with these hand-drawn graphics. It's a bit wonky, but at the same time, it's kind of charming, I guess. So this is what the game looks like. We have our goal here, so we have the data available to us on the left side in this scroll, which we can collapse. And you know, it is very much like a spreadsheet table. So basically we have this column here where we have multiple data in one cell. So we have the title of a movie, the rank, and also the premiere date or the year, and we have to extract the year. So this is like data normalization or like cleaning up data. So we can put these 3 data into different columns, so it's easier to work with them. So if I move my mouse down here, then we have our cards, which are split into categories. So we have string cards, we have math cards, and so on. So to solve this problem, we have to use a pretty simple algorithm. In this case, we have to use the right function to cut 4 characters from the right side. So we can drag this card over and we start brewing the potion, but we have to provide the ingredients to make this potion a reality. So we have to use this column because this is where we want to cut from. And we also have to provide how many characters we want to cut. So if we scroll all the way down, we have operators, but we can also have number and text constants. So if I drag number over here, we have an input field and I can type 4. And you'll see that when all the data is provided, we can brew the potion. And when we do so, we have this potion right here available on the shelf, and we also see the output of the last action we've done. And it seems like we are done with the task, right? Because we have 1994 here and here as well. But you see in spreadsheets, when the data in the cell is aligned to the left, it indicates that it is a string. And when it's aligned to the right, it indicates that it's a number. So we have to do a conversion between the 2 data types. And probably the easiest way to do it in spreadsheet software is to use a mathematical operation which doesn't change the value. And with this, it will be automatically converted from string to number. So what we can do is we can go to the operators and use any of these we like. I just use multiplication. And we have to have 2 values we want to multiply, right? So the first one will be the output of the first potion. And to make sure that the value doesn't change, we want to multiply it by 1. So multiplying this value by 1 will make it convert from string to number, and then we solve the problem and clear the level. So if I brew the second potion, you'll see that we have this scoring pop-up, and you'll see that we scared away 3 ghosts out of 3. And we have this score, which is based on the time elapsed, and also it has a very complicated rule set, which I don't really want to get into. And click on OK, we can continue to the next level. So this was a research project with the intention of providing a serious game to students where they can practice spreadsheet algorithms in a more motivating and more playful, gamified, serious game environment. But enough with the university projects. So we jump back in time to the August of 2018, and sort of slowly building my confidence with the university projects, I was like, I'm ready to make games now. So this is my first ever completed game, and it was made for Game Jam. You might know Ludum Dare. So this was the 42nd Ludum Dare, and the theme was running out of space. And this was quite an ambitious project for a first Game Jam game, and also the first time I really started to work with a bigger team. So we did this with a couple of my buddies, one guy making the art. That's why it looks gorgeous, because he was a graphic designer at the time, and also another friend of mine making the music and the sound effects for the game. So for this project, I was solely focusing on game design and programming, right? So we made this game called Penguin Voyage, and the theme was running out of space. So we came up with a little story you'll see in a second. We also have a very elegant tutorial, I think, for a Game Jam game. We have the controls, which are pretty simple, and we have these screenshots with these arrows and instructions attached to it. I think it's really nice. It looks cool and looks concise. And when we start a game, we were actually managed to squeeze in an intro.
We were doing a wonderful job killing our Earth slowly and painfully, yet it was still alive in 2018. But who gives a shit about humanity? They are the most boring, disgusting creatures among all. But penguins? Penguins are cute as hell, and smart, apparently. However, in 2060, global warming struck down on our planet, and ice caps melted quicker than my confidence when I tried to socialize. Anyway, the penguins were trying to figure out something to cool down Earth's temperature, so their council has gathered. They spent weeks finding a way to save the planet, but the only solution was to leave it behind themselves and find a new home. So the journey has begun.
So I think this intro is super fun with the comic strip and all the fun bits and humorous intro. I was super happy with what we managed to done, and you can see the gameplay itself is pretty simple. So global warming starts to take over Earth, and you have to, sort of like a mobile game, you have to make these jumps from planet to planet before global warming takes over. So we have these fun little planets, and it's deceptively hard. Like, the main problem with this Game Jam project was it's super hard to make the jumps. And you can see that the starting planet is always the Earth to sort of fit the story well, but then it's randomly generated. So we have some fun little planets. I hopefully can show you if I wouldn't suck at the game. Yeah, you can see that we have a basketball planet. We also have a Death Star and I believe a beer planet as well. Yeah, there's the beer planet. So it's a fun little game with simple controls and also very challenging gameplay, which we didn't intend to do. And to this day, I struggle making my games easier. So I managed to always make them difficult for whatever reason. So game balance and gameplay is pretty much my biggest struggle with game dev right now. But this was a super fun game. The scope was like surprisingly well picked for a jam game, because you can see that the gameplay itself is pretty simple, straightforward. It's randomly generated, which gives you a lot of content. And I had a team, so I could focus on programming. And you can see that I still managed to screw up. So sometimes the indicator arrow, which shows the curve you want to have, flickers for whatever reason. But this was a really fun game, and you can download it on my itch page if you want to try it out. Please submit your high scores in the comments below. Fast forward to April of 2020, COVID hit, right? So I was really busy with my uni studies between 2018 and 2020, but then the lockdown came and we were sort of forced to attend online classes and so on, right? So I figured this was the best opportunity to jump back into game dev. Again, we participated in a game jam. This was the 46th Ludum Dare, and the theme was Keep Them Alive. This time we had a huge team, actually. Like 10 people were involved, but most of them were like testing or brainstorming the ideas with us. We had the same two guys from the previous game, one of them on graphic design and the other one on sound and music. But we also had, so one of my roommates did this painting for the game and it was so beautiful. I was like, okay, let's include it in the title screen because it looks so cool. And also this time we had two people doing the art, which was super cool. And we came up with this idea for the theme keeping them alive to make a platformer where you are a mom of some ducklings and you want to escape the facility, right? Okay, so this time I got it for sure. So if we order the duckling to stop, then we can make the jump, drop the box over and order him to start following again. And you see, you can actually rescue other ducklings in the game, but I can't do it right now because I failed that puzzle. But maybe I can still do it.
Let's go.
Yep. So you'll see one of the problems with the game. The physics are kind of wonky. So I rescued the duckling, but he immediately died. And that's where I really started to hate Unity, by the way. Because to make this physics work, it was such a pain in the butt. Like, I struggled a lot with getting these boxes work. Okay, so now we can... This is the hardest jump in the game, by the way.
Let's go.
Yeah, and I couldn't make it, and that's the end of the game. Let's see if I can actually beat my own game.
Wait here.
Okay, so finally I made the jump. I lost one of the ducklings, but you know, it's still fun. So if you make it to the end of the game, we actually went to the second level and the boss fight, but I ran out of time because I struggled a lot with physics for this game. The boxes are very fiddly, it doesn't feel right, but it's still kind of a fun idea, but we couldn't really execute on it because I struggled a lot with Unity's physics system, and I was only able to do one level and then quickly put together this cutscene to indicate that this could have been much more because we had a lot of visuals available. You'll see this beautiful farm level and how well the boss character was done, but unfortunately I ran out of time. So I was super frustrated by the end of the deadline because I spent like 10 hours trying to get the physics working the way I wanted it to. I just really appreciate the fact that Godot has a dedicated pixel perfect to the engine part. Okay, so now we fast forward another year, so the April of 2021, COVID hit again, and this was the first Game Jam game I actually created in Godot. This was a duo effort, so I made it with one of my friends, and we sort of split the tasks into two. He was really new into Godot, he was interested in it, but didn't really have any experience. So this was more like a narrative-based game, and he did all the writing and sound effects, and sort of both of us tried to make pixel art, and then I did all the programming part. So this is called Delevator. It was made for Ludum Dare 48, and the theme was deeper and deeper. And we thought about making a narrative-based game because both of us wanted to do that for a long time, but never really get around it. So we came up with a story. So let's see what the game looks like. Click on Get In. Let's watch the intro sequence.
Please leave your message after the tone. Press any key to end.
So then we have a couple of mini games as well included. Like here you have this fiddly car key and you have to find the ignition. And everything's fine, right? You got into the car and did your part. So you'll see we go down level in the elevator and sort of the story and drama of Bruce unfolds. It's a pretty cool little experience. I definitely think we nailed the vibe. It's not a bad game for a game jam, I think. And quite ambitious, but not that bad. Okay, so I won't spoil the game for you if you want to play it. It's on my itch page. But what I also wanted to show you is that this is 2021, right? So just 3 years ago, I wasn't that good in structuring my game and using Godot at all. You'll see that this is the code for level 1, and instead of using animation players and tween nodes to sort of do these cutscenes and all the good stuff, I just used this abomination of code right here, right? So it's horrible to look at. So everything is basically programmed. And I've used yields, which is the equivalent of await in Godot 4. And we have all this code here with programmatically created timers and waiting for the timeout signals and coding everything by hand. It's so awful to look at. And it's so tedious. And you can do all of these very elegantly inside an animation player node, right? No real coding is needed for doing this kind of stuff. And it's just super ugly to look at. It's a bowl of spaghetti, but it turned out okay at the end. And I just wanted to show you this to sort of remind you that it's not the code and the architecture what makes the game. Sure, it's easier to write elegant code and create good architecture if you plan to add a bunch of new content to your game. But if you're doing a 72-hour game jam, it's fine to use hacky, shitty code. 1 month later, we're still in lockdown. It's the May of 2021, and I've participated in my first ever solo game jam. This is Evil Maze Master, which was made for Godot Wild Jam. It's a monthly Godot jam. I really like it. The community is super nice. So this was the 33rd Godot Wild Jam, and the theme was You Aren't the Hero. So I made this little puzzle game called Evil Maze Master. Again, we're still in Godot 3 because 4 haven't released yet. This is how the game looks like, super simple. If we go into full screen, we have a full intro sequence. I wrote this dialogue system. All the art is made by me, and also all the writing, so the characters and the dialogue. I was super inspired by Undertale, by the way, if you cannot tell. It was around that time that I did my first ever playthrough for Undertale, so I was super inspired by the dialogue. So you'll see this energy bar is the main thing to look at, where the hero tries to go into the next exit and go deeper. So you'll see that this was sort of the tutorial level, and you can go to the first real level. You have this level unlocking screen. And you always have a little chit chat with your boss, Emma. By the way, I was super proud that I came up with the name Emma for her, which is also an acronym for Evil Maze Master Artist. I really like that. So this is what the gameplay actually looks like. You can zoom in and out of the level. It looks real smooth. I really like how it turned out. And you have this cursor following around the tile map. And you'll have all the obstacles you can put down. So this is a relatively easy puzzle, right? If I put an under construction sign here, then the navigation path will be recalculated for the hero. And you'll see how much energy he has. This is probably the easiest level, right? Because it's easy to see that that's the longest path. As soon as you click the start button, the hero starts its journey. And your goal is to make sure that the energy depletes before he reaches the stairs. He falls asleep. And you won the level. So you can go back to the menu and select the next one. It's a pretty simple puzzle game, but it has a charming vibe to it, I guess. The theme for this jam was You Aren't the Hero, so that's why I came up with this whole making the heroes work harder by putting up obstacles for them. So it was a super fun and charming game. The level difficulties are not that well designed because this is the hardest level and it's only the second one. But it was super fun to make. I was able to do 9 levels, write all the dialogue and all that good stuff. It was super fun. So actually this was my most successful jam. I finished at a very prestigious overall 8th in the jam, which I'm super proud of. And also with Godot Wild Jam, the cool thing is that you have to open source your game. So you can see that the source code is available in my GitHub. What's cool about this is that if you read the other Godot games and you see a mechanic that you really like, you can just open the source code for the game and see how they implemented it, which is pretty awesome. So this is where I really started to love making games. I fell in love with Godot with this project, and I also really started to like this Godot Wild Gem concept. I just love the idea of open sourcing the entries. So this is Evil Maze Master. Again, if you want to play it, it's available on my itch and you can download the source code. Mind you that this was still made in Godot 3. So same year, I entered another Godot Wild Gem with two of my friends, this time in August 2021, Godot Wild Gem 36, and the theme was uncontrollable growth. So we came up with an idea that we make a platformer again, but this time with more interesting mechanics and also with speedrunning in mind. So we did just that, but also Godot Wild Gem doesn't just provide you with a theme, you also have optional curveballs you can make, which are called wildcards. And for this gem, we implemented 3 wildcards. The first one was to make a health mechanic, which is interesting in the game and not the usual one. Then we have Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which is sort of just including some secrets in the game. And also competitive spirit, which was, make the game competitive. That's why we leaned towards speedrunning. Again, the game was super fun, but it turned out really hard. All the comments we got for the entry was that they couldn't even beat the first level. Meanwhile, one of the guys who did the art and also was the main playtester for the project, one of my friends, he was making speedruns for the game kind of to entertain himself, right? And he did like sub 2 minutes to beat the whole game, and it has 3 levels. So still, game balance is not my forte. The game itself is super simple, the UI is not too nice, but the game is super fun. So the main idea is that your health is continuously depleting. This is the hydration level of this druid character. You can see at the top left corner of the screen, and you have to go into these puddles to start healing up and hydrating back, right? And you also have to destroy these crystals to beat the level. And you have this leaf, which is like an aiming mechanic. With the left mouse button, you can shoot acorns to destroy the crystals. But what's a really cool mechanic, I think, besides the usual jumping and all the platforming stuff, is that you can use an alternative but riskier way to move. So when you aim and press the right click instead of the left click, you can teleport your character, but it comes at a cost as it consumes a lot of hydration. So if I right click here, you'll see that a beam shoots out and I get teleported to that location. So if you try this game, you'll see that the jump is really heavy, but the controls are actually pretty snappy. So I'm happy with the controls, but you have to get used to it. So if you make this platforming part, that's the last crystal. And when you beat that, the level is cleared and you can move on to the next one. That's route out. Again, I won't spoil it. There's a boss fight included at the end, and we have secrets as well. It's a super challenging game, but I think it turned out to be fun, but way too hard. And also we have some UX problems, like these tiles don't pop out enough, or these platforms rather. So we could have made it clearer where you can jump and where you can't. It's a bit hard on the eyes sometimes, but it was a super fun project to make. And this is where I feel that my game dev skills are started to becoming better and better with Godot, especially because cramming this amount of mechanics into a game jam game is really cool. So like we had a full story, we had multiple levels, a boss fight, an interesting mechanic, speedrun timers, projectiles, aiming, a lot of cool stuff. So by the end of 2021, I never wanted to open Unity again. I just loved Godot 3. It was super fun and it was a mature engine at the time. Again, the game is available on my itch and the source code is on my GitHub. Fast forward to September of 2022, you probably didn't know this, but before starting Godot Game Lab, I actually created another YouTube channel, which was in my native language. So this was a Hungarian YouTube channel I did, and the whole premise was that, game dev channels like Danny and Jonas Tyroller were blowing up, and I was like, okay, that's cool, that's pretty much what I want to do. And there are no game dev channels in Hungarian. So I was like, cool, that's an option then. And I started with a simple promise. So I was 29 at the time, and I was like, I'm pretty confident in my game dev skills now, and I want to make a really cool project that's longer than a game jam game for my 30th birthday, because that was coming up, right? So my birthday is in January. So in 2023, January, I turned 30 and I was like, cool, we have a couple of months. I start a YouTube channel and I make a cool, inspiring game for my own birthday. And the idea was super nice. So this game was my magnum opus, my coolest game idea ever. And I started posting devlogs and adding all the new features to the game. You can watch these, but most of them are in Hungarian. I think for the intro video, I did English subtitles, but not for all the other ones. So I fell into the trap of scope creep, which is not unusual for new game devs, right? I have this idea for a super cool game. I have all the mechanics, all the programming skills to do it. I bought some really cool assets and I was like, I can do this. But it was way too ambitious for 3 or 4 months. And it never saw the light of the day. It would be super cool to actually do it one day, but I implemented quite a lot of impressive features, so I show you the project anyways. So this was done in Godot 3 still, because 4 was in beta or early access or something like that, or alpha at the time, and I didn't want to migrate for a project like this. And the idea for the project was super unique, I think. Another fun fact about me, when I was in high school, I used to dabble in rapping. So I was a Hungarian hobbyist rapper. I did a couple of songs. I wrote my own lyrics and I really liked it at the time. But as I got older, I sort of started to listen to other genres of music. I kind of grew out of rap as a genre. I still to this day listen to a couple of songs, but it's not my favorite genre anymore. And I was like, cool idea is that before I turn 30, I'll do a game which is about rapping. So my idea was to create a top-down pixel art game which is heavily focusing on narrative, right? So the protagonist would be a teenage rapper guy, and you sort of follow him around and unravel his story, his friends, his first love, and all that good stuff that happens to teenagers, right? And the twist on it was that he was a rapper, and actually writing rap songs would be part of the game, would be a game mechanic. So I was like, okay, how do we turn songwriting and creating rap songs into a game mechanic? And I titled the game Kira, which is a Hungarian acronym, and it roughly translates into experimental interactive rap album. So I wanted to make this a cross between a game and a rap album, which you can sort of compile yourself as you play the game. So the game features dynamic songwriting. Let's say that you got into a huge fight with your friend, right? Because he chose his new girlfriend over hanging out with you or something like that. And just like with most narrative games, you can decide how you feel about this as the protagonist, right? You feel angry, you feel sad, you feel disappointed. And when you pick how you feel, you sit down to write an actual rap song, right? And when you write a song, you can decide what lines or what rhymes you like better. And then the songs you write during the game actually change because of your narrative choices. I think this idea was super unique and cool, and I actually made it work. So you'll see the charming pixel art, and you have all the features you expect from a game like this. So I can go next to the basketball, for example, and you'll see the dialogue. It's super cool. It's in Hungarian because I was still on with my YouTube page. So I was like, making it in Hungarian would be a super cool idea. And you have this menu with a bunch of super cool features, like for example you have a music player where if you write your dynamic songs, which I was talking about, you can listen to them, so it's like a mini jukebox. You have this system for unlocking secrets you can find during the game. So for example, I have this scrambled up paper which I found in the bin, and it says rap lyrics in quotation marks, and it says that it's not a coincidence that I threw it to the trash. So it has like very simplistic, very cheesy rap lyrics written on the page, right? So you can unlock these secrets, and you have this notification right here on the top left that you found a new item. You can also go next to the speakers, and you can, start playing a song. If you don't like it, then you can stop playing that song. Super cool, right? You have these room transition effects when you go from one room to the next one. You have this pop-up showing where you're currently at. We have a door system with animations. You can interact with all the stuff inside the house. So I've done quite a lot of features actually for this game. And here's your desk where you can actually write the lyrics, and you can see you have this dialogue showing that you can do something like that. This is how the main menu looks like. I really like this effect of hovering over the houses, and you'll see the light. The guy is sometimes blinking. So I don't know. It's a cool concept. I have the credits, I have settings, all the good stuff. And we also have a test scene. So I did a whole dynamic programmable cutscene system, which is super cool. So if I talk to this person right here, you'll see that the black bar comes inside to see that you are inside the cutscene. The guy runs down on its own, runs back, and tells another line of dialogue. So this is super sick because the way it works inside the editor, we have a dialogue editor, which is a super cool plugin, by the way. And we can open one of the dialogues. So for example, you can see that this is the one I played before. And you can call functions, you can wait 4 seconds before doing another thing. And I did a bunch of custom functions which switches cameras or pushes notifications, then stops the cutscene from playing. So this is a super cool and robust system to actually make dynamic cutscenes, which you can program just by writing really easy lines of code. I was so proud of making this. So the features this prototype has are enormous. And I want to show you the actual songwriting mechanic. So you'll see this little notebook and you can pick from 2 sets of rhymes which you like better. This will be really silly because these are Hungarian folk songs. But still, if I pick this one because I like this one better, he starts writing all the rhymes. It looks super cool. I'm really proud of this animation as well. And then you have to match the rhymes together. So like this rhymes with this one, this rhymes with this one, and that's it, right? So you click on play and he starts writing the lyrics and the beat keeps on looping, right?
Száraz tónak nedves partján döglött béka kurutyó. Hallgatja egy süket ember, ki a vízben lubickol. Sejhaj, de ne vér, bennünk vannak kutya vér. Sejhaj, de ne vér, biciklizik az egér. Ja, tekerért a szaros vágok.
And what's super cool is it actually is synchronized to the beat. So this is really dynamic. When you write out all the lyrics in the notebook, there are separate audio files with only the voice lines recorded, and there is code written that synchronizes it to the beat so you can listen to how it sounds. Pretty awesome, right? So I think this is a super unique idea. It would be super fun to actually do this and finish it one day, but it was way too ambitious because even though I could make these systems and I could write the rap songs because I have experience with that, I didn't have any experience with writing stories, for example, or dialogue. So to make this interesting and a well worth story to play, I don't know, I would have to sacrifice years to do that. And after some time I realized that, okay, maybe I don't want to spend like 5 years doing this one project because I still want to experiment and do other stuff. So I'm super sad that this project never saw the light of the day, but at the same time, I'm super proud of the progress and the modules and the cutscene system and the dynamic rap song system I created. It was super fun to work on it. And at this time, I was really enjoying doing YouTube, creating the devlogs. I was traveling a lot after COVID, so it was super fun. But also after a time, it felt like a chore. Okay, I have to work on this game. I have to put out the videos because otherwise, what's the point? And I just felt a bit burned out. But still, Kira is one of the projects I'm most proud of. I just really wanted to show you this one. And after that burnout I was talking about, I took some time off from game development. So I came back in May of 2023 with another Godot Wild Jam. So this was Godot Wild Jam 57, and I've teamed up with another great guy who did sound design and music for this game. And the theme was Forgotten Knowledge. So we created the Big Black Book of Magic, which was a relatively simple game, but it was super fun to make. A side note that I made this in Godot 4, which was still in beta, I believe. That's where I made the jump to try out Godot 4, and I loved it so much. Such a huge improvement, but it was still a bit unstable with the release. The game itself has a very promising idea, I think, but the execution from my side, the game design perspective, was a bit off, but it was super cool. We can skip the tutorial for now. So it's a kind of like a tower defense game where you can run around like in a platformer. You can teleport between the different teleports, and you see these undead creatures are starting to attack the castle, and the Forgotten Knowledge is the Big Black Book of Magic. So you open the Big Black Book of Magic, and now you have to deal with the undead hordes you summoned. So what you can do is you can draw your spells with the right mouse button, and then you can sort of shoot around these undead creatures. So you have to run back and forth between the different points of the castle. And to cast your spells, you have to draw them. So you'll see if I draw a circle, nothing happens because there's no such spell. So if I press escape, you'll see that the only spell you have is the magic arrow. And you have to draw this shape to summon up your magic arrows. Super cool, right? And when you beat a level, you can pick between different upgrades, like in a roguelike game. You can pick between the lightning spell or the ice bolt, for example. Let's pick the ice bolt for now. And this is the shape you have to draw to cast the spell. You'll see in the second level, I think that's the shape, yeah. You have another level you have to deal with. But again, I screwed this up big time because you can teleport to the second level, but the walls are closed there, so what's the point, right? So you have these flying enemies as well. And for this game jam, I've used asset packs. So, you know, I struggle with art a lot and I spend a lot of time on it. So I was like, okay, let's not spend time on art then. We can focus on gameplay and sound design. So this time we used asset packs and I drew some extra sprites here and there, like the portal. These are supposed to glow, by the way. But this version of Godot 4 didn't support glow on web exports, for example. So we had a couple issues like this. And it's a fun little game, but like the gameplay, the core gameplay loop is not that fun. I think it would have been more fun if we focused on the spell casting, maybe ditch the side scrolling part and do it in a top-down perspective, something like that. I don't know. Again, you can repair the castle or learn a new spell. So this is the fireball. And on the last level, you can go up to the roof. And you can always press escape because I didn't remember. Okay, so that's the shape. If you cast the fireball, you'll see that it's very short range. So that's another design flaw in the game. Like you spend a lot of time wanting to cast that powerful fireball spell. And it just explodes sooner because it's short range. So this game turned out to be not that hard. Like right now I talk a lot, so I'll probably lose. But basically the spells were interesting. And it looked like fun, right? Like learning the fireball spell to cast that powerful attack. But in reality, the magic arrow was the strongest one, and you can just keep on spamming it because it's super easy to draw on the screen. Despite all that, the game had a promising idea, I think, so it's super fun to do this drawing recognition. And I actually wanted to turn this into a Godot plugin, but I'll show you all my abandoned projects later. And at this point, I was a little bit frustrated with my own game dev journey because you can see that I've participated in a bunch of game jams, but I never really have made anything bigger than a game jam scope, right? So my only attempt was Kira, and we see how I realized that it's scoped way too big and I was never going to finish it. So at this point, I was like, okay, I want to make bigger games than game jam games, but still ones that are inside a reasonable scope. So I decided to make my own gems, so to speak, and create these mid-scope games where I use self-imposed deadlines. That's how I did RememBlur. So this game was made entirely in Godot 4, and I released it in July 2023. This was a time when the AI boom started to happening and everyone was super hyped about ChatGPT and all those AI tools. So I did make my own deadline, which was 3 months to finish a game, right? So this is what RememBlur is. To have inspiration, I created paper prototypes and generated themes just like I would with a game jam game. I came up with this super weird idea that is a roguelike game and also a cross between Hangman and 20 Questions. So it was a super weird idea, but somehow it kind of works, I think. So when you create a new story, you have to type in a name, who's this story about. So let's say it's about Shrek, for example. And then you have this solution, you have some energy, and you have 10 minutes to solve the puzzle, and you're a neuron who walks inside the brain, right? So you have to navigate the space inside the brain, and you have all these different parts of the brain where you can get hints based on the basic senses. So you can also have some power-ups like here, some extra time. You can have a letter. if you take a hint from the gustatory cortex, for example, you'll see it has a star rating of how helpful is that clue you have. So it says that the taste of this fruit veggie is fruity. Well, that's not really helpful though, right? It's 2 out of 3. It's a fruit and veggie, so we know that it tastes probably fruity, right? So then you can move on to the other cortexes, like, okay, what's it smell like? Take another hint. It smells fruity. Okay, great example. And you can see that the same sense goes on a cooldown for a bit. And you have the somatosensory cortex for touching. And you also have something right here, how it looks like, right? The visual cortex. So let's take another one. So X means it's not. So it's not large. So what can it be? It tastes fruity, it smells fruity, and it's not large. We can have sounds as well. So let's take a hint from the auditory cortex. So you can play the sound, and it says that it's not that. So you can take a look at all the hints you currently have, and you can filter them for helpful and unhelpful, right? So I kind of know what words are included in the game, right? I have like 100 of them, but I can confidently guess that this is watermelon. Okay, so when you actually guess the correct word, you can pick an upgrade, right? So we can lower the cooldown on the sight or the touch senses, or we can get an extra percentage chance for finding helpful hints. Let's just lower the cooldown on the sight. And you see we have this dialogue that Shrek remembers this word, and we have 5 more words to remember. So let me speed up the process a bit here. Okay, so I must admit that I cheated here and looked up my table of puzzles to make sure that I finish in a reasonable time, but that's the core gameplay loop. You get helpful and unhelpful hints. You can grab some upgrades, some extra time, and a given letter or an extra letter to help you along the way. And it has the rules of a hangman. So if I wouldn't guess the correct word on the first try, but I have some letters that match, then it will be revealed. So when you solve all the levels, and remember I said that this is during the AI hype, if you beat all the levels, you get a story. And what I did is, instead of building in the API, which is super expensive, I did generate a prompt with a random genre that is an instruction for an AI model, right? So generate a short sci-fi story, make sure it's in English, use this amount of words. The main character is called Shrek. Make sure to include the following words. And these are the words you had to use, right? So this is why you had to name your character, whose brain you are inside. So then you'll have an AI generated story. And we have a couple of fun genres like comedy, skits, and drama, and sci-fi, and youth novel or young adult novels, and so on. So it's super fun. And this whole text is automatically copied to the clipboard. Then you can just click on the ChatGPT button. It opens it up and you can paste your story, and an AI model will generate the story for you. So I thought this was, again, a super unique and fun idea. And I learned a lot with this game because, game development is not always super fun. When you test your ideas and prototype and experiment and keep adding new features, that's the fun part. But coming up with 100 different puzzles or 100 different words you can find out and assigning all those clues to them is not fun. So half the time I put into this game was actually to create this Excel table with all the available puzzles and solutions, right? So we have 100 words in the game, and I have to assign all the useful hints to them, like for all the senses. Again, I thought this was a super fun game and a cool idea. The playtests revealed that it was really hard, so people couldn't really find out the solutions and ran out of time. So I still have this burden of making really hard games. Maybe I could have included more letter pickups, so if you struggle to think of the word, you can find more letters, but I don't know. After 3 months, I felt like I was done with this game. It's out there. What I'm most proud of this game is that it's kind of polished, it's a fun idea, and it's a unique game, and I've always aimed to make unique games if possible. Again, if you're interested, you can play it on itch, you can download it, and you can also see the source code because it's on my GitHub. After releasing RememBlur, I was super happy, and I was proud that I was finally able to release a mid-scope game which I can call a game, not just a game jam project or a prototype. Being happy with the results, I figured why not do this again? And that's how we arrive at Memory Lane, which is my first ever released mobile game. I was like, okay, what kind of challenge I can do this time to make it a bit more interesting than the last one, or have some kind of a challenge, right? So Memory Lane released just before I started doing Godot Game Lab in November 2023, so it is probably more than a year old now. I played a lot of Slay the Spire back then, and I had this idea that it would be super cool to make a Slay the Spire-like game where you can't really play your cards by default, but you have to play them by matching them like in a memory game. And I was like, okay, that's pretty compatible with the mobile, created a Swift prototype. It looked fun. So I was like, okay, we can turn this into a full game. Again, did this hard limit of working for 2 or 3 months. And here's what we end up with. So this is Memory Lane. You can play it on my itch page, and it works with phones as well. But if you have an Android, then you can download it. It's available on Google Play. It has no ads, 100% free to play. Again, this was done in Godot 4, and this is how it looks like. So you have this little presentation kind of thing where you can get some information about how the game works. I did the art for this game as well. That's why it's terrible. And you have some statistics, win rate and total levels, won, total enemies killed, and so on. The game has 3 unlockable elements. So you play as a wizard. Fire is the default one which is available. And those 3 play very, very differently from each other. So fire is the default one. And when you start to play, it's sort of similar to Slay the Spire. You see 2 cards are revealed on each of your turns. You can take a look at your deck. And because it's mobile, I try to use as little text as possible. So you have 2 lanes for the enemies. You have the ground lanes and the airborne enemies. So you have the basic strike or damaging cards. And if you click on them, you have these little tooltips for the target and the effect this card has. You have discard board, you have some healing, and you also have some cool little extra cards, which are for this fire character. So you can apply ignite. So if you try to play the game, you'll see that if you cannot match the cards, then you basically throw away your turn. So if I remember correctly, yes, so this was an air attack and this too, then it matches, it damages the enemy. You'll see the enemies behave very differently from each other. You have this little indicator under them. And the blue one means they want to move forward, but sometimes it takes multiple turns for them to do this. And you don't have an indication of that. You have to sort of learn this from playing the game. And you can also see that similar to what we have in the Slay the Spire course, you have these status effects, and if I click on these statuses, you have this tooltip. And finally, I know the full configuration of this board. So this one can match with this one. It deals 1 damage to the first skeleton. Then I can kill that closer skeleton with the ignite and the 1 damage. And finally, I have to get rid of that last skeleton. This icon here shows how many enemies are left in this stage. And you have 10 levels for a run. So if you want to win a run, you have to beat 10 levels. Okay, cool. That kills the skeleton. So when you win a level, you have this little screen showing how many levels you won, how many enemies you've slain, and then you can add cards to your deck. And this means adding a pair of those cards, obviously. And you can skip them, or if you have rerolls, you can get rerolls from playing the game more. You can reroll them to new rewards, but this one's pretty good, and also this one's pretty good. Like, this targets all the ground enemies, so I can just take this. And you know, a second level comes in. Your deck is a bit bigger. You'll see that now you have 14 cards, so the draw pile is not empty anymore. And you can utilize the draw pile and the discard pile to sort of use it to your advantage during the game. It's a super fun game. Again, it's really hard. Like, it's pretty easy to beat like the first 3 or 4 levels, but there are some really hard levels. So on my phone during a long flight, I was actually managed to beat the game a couple of times. So I have all 3 characters unlocked. Again, if you want to try it, it's free on itch, it's free on Google Play, and also the source code is available on my GitHub. And I have to admit that after Memory Lane, I started doing Godot Game Lab, right? The idea actually came from finishing Memory Lane, because I did a lot of the architectural stuff and a lot of mechanics which you saw in the Slay the Spire course for Memory Lane. So I was like, cool, maybe I can turn this into a tutorial and start doing YouTube in English. So I'm super proud of Memory Lane, and also it kicked off the development and sort of the idea of doing courses for YouTube. And I have to admit that this channel takes up a lot of my free time, right? So editing these videos, coming up with the structure, the architecture, and all that stuff takes a lot of time and effort. So I didn't really have time to make games since then, which is kind of a shame because, you know, I was on a roll. I just released 2 games in half a year, and I was super proud of that. But at the same time, I really enjoy teaching in real life and virtually on YouTube as well. So I didn't really have the time and energy to create my own games. Since then, I focused on teaching, but this summer I was like, okay, enough is enough. I should make a game. So I entered the Kenny Jam, and the theme was connections. So this jam is super fun. You can only use the one and only Kenny's assets. And with connection, I came up with this idea that you can do this kind of roguelike auto battler game where you have to connect your attacks and icons together. So you can see that these are the same assets I've used for my course. If you click on play, you'll see the tutorial. So you have like these attack actions and the defend actions, right? Pretty straightforward. And you have to battle the enemies. You have your HP and your shield. And if you reduce your enemy's HP to 0, you win. And this number indicates how many connections you can make. So if I connect this attack to this one, this attack back to the first one, and this back to that one, then we have a loop. So that's the whole gimmick of the game, is that you can create loops. So right now it's a bold strategy that I don't use the block at all. I only use attacking moves. So when we start the fight, you'll see that like in an auto battler, the battle plays itself out and you can always see what your character is intending to do. And when you win a battle, you can pick up an upgrade. So for example, you can pick this one instead of one blocking action, or you can pick an extra connection or +2 max HP. If you hover over them, you'll see it deals 3 damage, this big axe, but it takes 2 seconds to use that. Or you can use this wand, which attacks and also heals you, and it takes 1.5 seconds to use this. So I don't know, let's pick the big axe because it looks like fun. And you have this ghost enemy who starts from 6 HP. Then we can do something like this, maybe do a big attack, or maybe we can start with a big attack. So you can click on these connections and redo them. So start with a big attack, then a small attack, then a blocking action. When we start a fight, you can see the intentions of the enemy. And you can see that this ghost heals itself. So I kind of screwed up the game design for this fight because it's almost impossible to beat this ghost actually, because he heals for so much. If you don't have an axe, I think it's impossible to beat him, but I have one, so I might eventually win this battle, I think. But it's super fun to see these connections and see how the battle turns out. I think it's a fun little idea. I don't know if we ever beat them or if this is a stalemate. Yeah, so I beat the ghost. Again, we can pick an upgrade. Let's add the leeching one now. And you'll have to fight this Cyclops. And I think that's the last fight in the game. So let's see if I can beat that Cyclops. Let's go, little guy. Okay, so... Oh, that wasn't the last fight. So let's do an extra connection. Oh, it was the last fight. Okay, so we're back to the tutorial. Okay, so that's all there is to it. I only had time for 3 fights. Again, the idea is fun. I think it's promising. It was super fun to make this game. And this was, I believe, between the 2 seasons for the Slay the Spire course, or after finishing the second one as well. So it was nice to take a little break from creating the course and do a fun little game experiment. Nothing too fancy here, but it was fun to create it. So that wraps up all the projects I ever created and released or left in a useful state, including game jams and full games, so to speak. And I decided to cut the video here and create a separate video for all the abandoned projects, you know, the game dev cemetery, which is a bit more sad, but it will be kind of nice to just reopen them and see how much potential they had, which sadly never got realized. So I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.